Hello, English 1101. This will be a brief introduction to rhetoric. This is the lesson in your week 4, that is titled "What is Rhetoric?" So let's get into this. There's another PowerPoint that's also an introduction, but there's a little overlap, but you should view both. But I will do a video of this one, and you can still look at both. All right, let's get started here. Oops. All right. So to answer the question, what is rhetoric? Some of you probably have some experience with rhetoric from high school, and others do not. But don't worry if this is a new concept to you. These are a few examples, a few definitions. A really basic definition is this one at the top left: the art, practice, and study of human communication. That covers a lot, I know, but we can look at any type of human communication. In your rhetorical analysis, you might choose to analyze an ad, a digital ad, or you might analyze a speech, or you might analyze a nonprofit video that is advocating for some cause. Those are 3 different types of communication, but all of them essentially involve rhetoric, okay, which is the art of persuasion, essentially, is what Aristotle said there. Moving on here. You'll hear me refer to the rhetorical triangle. That is essentially the audience, the speaker or messenger, and the purpose or message. You also might hear in the textbook or other contexts rhetorical situation, and that's a really broad term that includes not just the rhetorical triangle, but a lot of different components. But let's move on here to just the basics of the rhetorical triangle. Well, I want to be very clear on this. The rhetorical triangle is what you see here. Does not refer to the 3 rhetorical appeals. We will look at the appeals in a minute, but the appeals are certainly involved, obviously, with the rhetorical triangle. There is some connection, but when I ask you to write in your paper to identify the rhetorical triangle, I'm not asking you to comment on ethos, pathos, and logos. I'm asking you simply to identify who is the communicator, who is the speaker. That will be either a person or a company or a nonprofit, depending on what video you choose. If you're writing your rhetorical analysis on President Obama's speech that's on your list from the Democrat convention, then he is the communicator. However, if you choose the Nike, Under Armour, Samsung, or IKEA ads, the communicator is not a person, but it's a company. Okay, so keep that in mind. It could be an individual, or it could be a company, or it could be an organization like the Nature Conservancy that's a nonprofit organization that advocates for the environment. All 3 of those examples are different, but they all point to the communicator. So again, it could either be an individual or a company or an organization. The message is simply what is the main message in very basic terms. When I ask you to write about the rhetorical triangle, I'm just asking you to identify what are the key points of the ad or the message, and then you will analyze how well the communicator conveys that message and persuades his or her audience, okay, with your analysis. But when I ask you again, it's just a brief part of your paper near the beginning of your body, you want to identify the basic 3 tenets of the rhetorical triangle. The third part is the audience. Now, that actually is plural, so you'll have any speaker or company will have multiple audiences, so you never have just one audience. It's extremely rare to have a singular audience. And all of the videos in the media bank that you will choose from, no matter which one you choose, you will have multiple audiences. So an example would be like you take a speech like President Bush's speech at 9/11 at ground level, where 9/11 occurred. Well, he's speaking to the American public, so that's one audience. He's also speaking to the first responders, which are basically another audience, a more narrowly defined audience. He's also speaking to a global audience, okay? He's also speaking to terrorists and people who did this, okay? And there's definitely that in his message. So for that example, there are four audiences. If you look at President Obama's speech, he's speaking to Democrat voters, so the Democratic Party voters, but he's also speaking to those that may be independents. So those are two audiences. He's also speaking to the people in the room at the Democrat National Convention. So those are three right there. If you look at one of the corporate ads, so Nike ad, for example, they are promoting their brand, but it's in kind of an abstract way. But if you look at the Nike ad, they are targeting people who play sports that are casual and maybe just people who are trying to get somewhat in shape. And if you watch that video, you'll know what I mean. Not serious like athletes, but they're also targeting people who are athletes, who are professional athletes, who are high school and college athletes. So each one of these has multiple audiences. One more quick example would be the IKEA ad focuses on sustainability. So they have an audience of people who shop at IKEA value sustainability. However, some people maybe don't, or they're not in line with that, but they just like the IKEA brand and they think it's cool design, whatever. That's a different audience than the sustainability consumer. Okay, and you see the point. Each one of these has multiple audiences, so please do not write in your paper that the audience is the world or everyone or anyone who likes sports, if it's Under Armour or Nike. So that is the rhetorical triangle explained. All right, moving on to the rhetorical situation, you have writer, subject, audience. You have these other ways to analyze your video, okay? And we're not going to get heavy into exigence, but purpose and genre is like, is it a formal speech like in front of Congress? So some of those are, or President Obama's speech is a formal audience, a formal setting, I should say, and the genre is a traditional speech. However, like if you looked at some of the others, like Seth Rogen's, however, it's formal. Seth Rogen talks to a congressional panel or congressional committee. He doesn't really take a formal approach in his speech. So the genre is less, I would say, serious subject, but less formal setting than, say, President Obama's speech. So that's the genre. You want to think about all four of these. Like, what's the context? Like, what happened? If it's the 9/11 speech from President Bush, obviously a horrible terrorist attack occurred on 9/11. That is the context. The context for Seth Rogen's would be that his family member, his mother-in-law, has Alzheimer's, and that's why he's passionate about the issue. It has affected him personally. If you're looking at like the Under Armour or Nike ads or Apple, the context depends on what they're really promoting. Apple's one of theirs is Mother Nature promotes the sustainability features of Apple products. The context is Apple's move or Apple's concern with the environment and how they're going to showcase that to consumers. And the context is also that they're a global brand and they want to show the world that they care about the environment and they're trying to make their products in a sustainable way. Each one of them has their, each video has a specific context, and that's just kind of basically what you can observe by watching. You will understand the context. You want to consider, this says authors, but you can think of it as speaker or company's purpose. In any piece of, it says writing, but in this case, a video, like think about what the purpose is of the company or speaker that's giving the speech. So, the rhetorical appeals. This is a really brief slide on this, but it's really, don't overthink rhetorical appeals. It's not as complicated as you might think. We're not looking at kairos, so we're just looking at the three major appeals. First is ethos. That refers to ethics and credibility of the speaker or of the company if you're looking at an Apple or one of the brand ads that I have in the media bank. Credibility. What makes in the media, what promotes that credibility, okay? What makes that person believable if it's a speaker, like a TED Talk speaker? What experience does the speaker have, okay, or the company? If it's Nike, obviously it has decades of experience, selling products, and they are reputable because they've been around for so long. They are endorsed by, many professional athletes. Under Armour is not as old of a company, but by now it has a brand that's credible. College teams use Under Armour equipment, so you can also look at it that way if it's a brand. Pathos appeals to emotions, and this is any emotion. So a lot of people think pathos appeals are just about like maybe um, like like sad or very extreme emotions like anger, but it also can be light humor. It can be any emotion. Light humor. Seth Rogen uses humor. That is pathos. There's pathos in the Apple and the brand ads. So pathos doesn't have to be these extreme emotions. It can be subtle humor, subtle sarcasm, but also it can be those extreme emotions of anger, fear, and so forth. So forth. So what do you see in the video of pathos? You want to look for these appeals in your video when you're writing your paper. And then lastly, logos is basically, think of it as like formal arguments in the ad. So use of statistics, or in the video, use of statistics, use of data, hard data, use of science, use of any kind of facts or any kind of actual concrete data. And then also logical appeals would work. Okay. Building an argument. Think of it like if you're going to convince somebody without any ethos or pathos, what would you do? You would build an argument based on logical reason, so reasoning, facts, and that sort of thing. All right, moving on here. This is just more follow-up with logos, ethos, and pathos. I'll let you look at that later. Just a little graphic there. Other things that sometimes are used in especially written rhetoric, but also in speeches, you want to look for this. Sometimes they're analogies or symbolism or figurative language. Matthew McConaughey's, he uses a lot of this in his speech. If you want to look at someone who uses a lot of kind of, you would say literary devices, but in his speech there is analogy, there's symbolism, okay? And you can look at this review later. This just wraps it up. But if you want to do this at home, you can. This is just a way to kind of get started at putting your knowledge of rhetoric, once you feel like you have a grasp of it, onto paper, or by looking at, first you can just, like in one paragraph, 4 to 5 sentences, define rhetoric in your terms, your terminology, and then like maybe do your definition for the 3 rhetorical appeals. That's a good way to learn. Write down what you learned. You do need to understand these concepts, so putting it in your own words could help. And then secondly here, for each of the three appeals, just real quickly, get on Instagram or another social media, or just YouTube, whatever, find an ad or a speech that uses an appeal, uses the 3 appeals well, and just briefly write how it uses each appeal. That's something you can do at home. It's just an exercise we do in class when I have it in person, and it's a good way, just in a quick way, to write down your knowledge and apply it to something you see on Instagram or YouTube or whatever. All right, that's it for this lesson. Let me know if you have any questions. Just email me. Take care.